Welcome to the next in our series of video time capsules commemorating the 75th anniversary of the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I'm Larry Lynch, University Archivist at UW-Eau Claire. It's Friday, May 22nd, 1992, and we are going to talk about the past, present, and future of this university in addressing the theme of the 75th observance, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'd like to introduce our panelists. On the left is Dr. CeCelia Zorn. CeCelia is Assistant Professor in Nursing Systems Department. She's been at UW-EC since 1980. Her undergraduate degree is also from UW-Eau Claire. CeCelia has also been a practicing nurse. She has numerous journal articles on nursing to her credit and has given several papers at meetings and conferences. She received the Van Oort Award for Faculty Creativity and Scholarliness. Her research interests include the level of hope among non-institutionalized elderly, gerontology, and teaching methods and strategies. Next to her left is Dr. Gabriel Kojoian. Gabe is professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. He was telling me earlier that he grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, a very ethnic community. In 1953 to 1956, he was a project engineer on the USS Nautilus, the first nuclear submarine. From 1972 to 1974, he was a staff scientist at the MIT Radio Observatory. 1974 to 76, he was in the Department of Physics at Pahlavi University in Shiraz, Iran. And he came to UW-Eau Claire in 1976. Twice he was selected to be a long-term exchange scientist in the Soviet Union. And he says that his most satisfying accomplishments at UW-Eau Claire concern the intellectual development of undergraduate members of the scientific research group. His continuing research is on extragalactic objects utilizing radio telescopes. Next is Tony Gulig. Tony just completed his MA in history from UW-Eau Claire, concentrating on U.S. and Canadian Indian history, especially Indian policy and relations. His master's thesis won second prize in a Midwestern competition of graduate schools. His Bachelor of Arts degree is also from Eau Claire with a major in secondary education. Currently, he is very busy as a lecturer at UW-Eau Claire in the departments of History and Geography and at UW-La Crosse in History. He's also an instructor in social studies at Chippewa Valley Technical College. He's the co-author of a classroom activity book on Chippewa treaty rights and is well known around these parts as a dedicated canoeist. Finally, there's Gretchen Hutterli. Gretchen is assistant to the dean in the School of Business and a marketing instructor in the Department of Business Administration. She's been at UW-Eau Claire for 8 years. She has taught consumer behavior, professional selling, retail management, and marketing management. She has an MBA from UW-Eau Claire and a Bachelor in Science and Design from UW-Madison. Gretchen is interested in art, architecture, traveling, theater, and biking. I'd like to start the way we've started all of these video time capsules with an attempt to characterize the campus culture at UW-Eau Claire. What we're trying to find out is how each of you view the sort of relationships that exist on the campus between students and faculty, among faculty and staff and administration. How welcoming a campus is it for new students, non-traditional students, minorities, elderly students? What kind of a campus is this? CeCelia, would you like to start with that?
Sure. Thanks, Larry, for the introduction. I think probably sensitivity characterizes the campus culture. I think sensitivity to the environment and sensitivity among staff and faculty and students. I think perhaps a bit on the negative side is an acceptance if you're acceptable, and I think generally there are some criteria that characterize acceptability or acceptance, and you're accepted if you meet those criteria. So I see that perhaps as a bit of a negative, but generally I think sensitivity probably would characterize the campus.
Do you feel that, what sort of criteria do you think one has to meet to get accepted?
I think they're unwritten generally. I think we pay a fair amount of lip service to respecting differences and diversity, and I don't mean racial diversity. I mean diversity if you smoke and if you don't smoke, and diversity if you wear your hair in a fashion that's contemporary, etc. So I think that We pay a fair amount of lip service to that, but maybe we don't always live that in our behavior. I think students perhaps are treated differently in classes if they may not fit those criteria, or if they have ideas that aren't similar to the faculty's ideas. So some of those kinds of things, and I don't mean to start out with some of the negative things, because I think that generally the campus is much more positive than that, but there are incidents of that.
Do you think there is anything unique about this campus compared with other campuses?
I think the setting is very unique. I think geographically, in terms of the beauty surrounding the campus, is very unique. I think the community is unique in that it's kind of a mixture of some, perhaps a bit of urban kind of lifestyle as well as close accessibility to rural kinds of activities, i.e. the farming community and the rivers and the lumbering, and we're part of that community. We know when kind of the logging truck tips over on Highway 29 outside of town, when you wouldn't know that perhaps in Milwaukee or Madison. So I think that's what makes it unique.
Gabe, you've been here several years. How do you find this campus?
The campus, how do I find the campus? The campus is organic. It's constantly changing, and the personality, the attitudes depend upon the people that are there at the moment. So the differences between 76 when I first came in, between the 70s and now, is very significant, because the people that are here now, there are numbers that are here now that were not there. The campus consists, a given campus, a given situation consists of the personalities, of the collective personalities of the people, of the individuals involved, and also the personalities of the students. And when you ask that question, the thought goes through mine is, how do I choose a campus as a student? How do I choose a university? And the way to do that, I would think, is to visit and see if your personality to some extent overlaps the general personality of the campus or the personality of the department you're going to be involved in. And if it doesn't, then you're asking for potential problems aside from intellectual problems. So the response to your question is, it's an ongoing organic, the personality is ongoing and it's organic, depending upon the individuals involved. The significant differences between the 70s and the 80s, and the 70s and of course now in the 90s, is that this was a more provincial campus back in the 70s. In fact, when I came here in 76, I was viewed as a unique individual. And I felt that, and I recognized that, and I was humored by it. Yeah, humored by it, because there weren't many most of the people that I met here were people from the Midwest, or even people from Wisconsin. That is, the people on the staff that I met were Wisconsin people, or generally Midwestern people who live close by, Minnesota, Illinois, and so forth. And so there wasn't any significant diversity at that time. And that has been changed to some small extent, some extent between that period and this period. In terms of your uniqueness, there's a potential problem in this campus. In my view, a campus of this size and with this particular mission, when you ask that question, the question comes to mind: will we survive into the future? And I view it as that this campus, if it does survive into the next century and beyond, unless it finds a unique channel unless it can do something that is unique and different from other campuses, its survival will be dependent upon the political situation. There'll be a political survival and not necessarily an intellectual survival. And by that I mean simply this, that we have this campus is 10,000 people, and if we attempt to compete with Madison, that would be a mistake, from my view. If we attempt to compete with other universities our size, that also would be a mistake. I think the way to survive is for departments or groupings of universities to do something to create some particular program which is unique, which is not available, and a program that is desirable, that is useful to the community, by community, I mean I don't mean the local community at large, and that a program that is not generally available elsewhere. And if we do that in our particular departments, then we'll have a very good chance of surviving and growing, surviving on an intellectual basis rather than a political basis. So when that question is asked, I think that it'd be interesting to differentiate it. That yes, we may survive politically because of our location, but will we survive intellectually? In other words, will be recognized outside of the region as an institution of significant value. And the way to do that, as I said earlier, is to create a niche.
I've kind of been hearing other comments along this line, but the comments that I've heard is that Eau Claire is kind of unique in being a mainstream niche. There's all kinds of specialized ones around us, but Eau Claire is right in the dead center, and that there's a growing interest again in liberal studies and a well-rounded education. I don't know if it's ever going to get away from acute specialization, but if it's true that people will go through a lot of career changes, that maybe an undergraduate education really should be very broad and very central. And maybe the unique thing about Eau Claire is that everybody else is specialized in something else, and Eau Claire is really a very mainstream kind of a campus that does it very well.
When I say specialized, I want to clarify. I don't mean in terms of process-oriented. I think what you implied, the implication was process-oriented. In fact, I think if we become process-oriented, and some of our programs are process-oriented in our departments, if we become process-oriented, then in fact we're in competition, not with other universities, but we're in competition with vocational institutes. Because that's the primary purpose, from my perspective, of vocational institute is to be process-oriented, to teach people how to do something, a specific task on which they can go out and gain some measure of employment, and which is understood by all concerned that within some period of time, number of years, that will be obsolescent. We go back to school to learn another process. But a university life is that should not, in my view, part and parcel of university life. In our university life, our program should be directed towards critical thinking. And so that an individual will learn the mechanisms and understand the basis of his or her discipline. And then so when you leave the university, you have the potential for creating the new ideas. And if you don't create it, at least of being able to learn the new ideas without attending a formal process, going through a formal process again. That, I think, should be the central structure, the focus of the educational process of university. Aside from that, when I talk about niches, there are particular programs that, if one looks ahead, that one may be able to see in his or her department, and which programs which will have significance in the future, and yet programs which other universities, because of their structure and because of their structure, are unable to institute. And so, if we're able to do that, then we'll be able to ensure our longevity on an intellectual basis. So there's two things I would say is to look for programs, look at possible programs that are unique, that are not available in many other places, unique in that sense, and then also is to, in my view, to attempt to change the structure of instruction away from process-oriented, teaching them how to do something, but into a direction in the direction of critical analysis. And I mentioned my students. I asked, why do you kids come to school? I ask that question every semester. Why do you kids come to school? And then they look at me stunned. Now, they've been in the 12 years in the public school system, and this is their first or second year with me. And the responses I get typically is to get a job. Well, I point out, if you're interested in getting a job, that means process-oriented. We have a vocational institution whose primary function is that. You see? And then they look at you, and they're puzzled. Then it says to learn, to get educated. I don't know what that means, I must tell you. To get educated, I don't understand that. But I point out that the basic, I said, look, I point out that, look, I don't know what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now. And you certainly don't know what you're going to be doing 5 years from now as a student. I don't care what course you're in, what program you're in. It doesn't guarantee you're going to be working that program in a specific focus that you had planned to. But the only thing we know in life, the only thing that's constant in life, is that we're making decisions all the time. We're constantly making decisions to come here, to talk to you, to say hello to you, and so forth and so on. And so consequently, the process of an intellectual experience is to increase the degree of confidence you have in your decision-making processes. That's it. If you can increase the degree, if the process can do that, increase the degree of confidence I have in my decision-making processes, so when I do things, I have a high degree of confidence a high degree of confidence in whatever I'm doing. And that shows up in everything you do. If you're able to do that in the educational process, you're a winner. You can go out and have the potential of being successful at any opportunity that's available. But if all you've learned is processes, you'll be under control wherever you work. Yeah, and so that's the essence of, I think the education, from my perspective, that I think that's what we should focus for, is to increase the degree of confidence, develop programs which will do that, and then develop programs which will enhance the confidence we have in ourselves, and so that when you go out to work, and if you're competent, then you're less apt to be under control of your respective supervisor. That is, there's a lesser degree of control, because all that we have here is we're controlling each other. If you look upon life, that's all. Each one of us are exerting or are attempting to increase our influence and our control over others in life. If you stop and analyze it, you find there's a measure of truth in that. And so, in order to attempt to overcome that in your own life, is to one way of doing that is to increase the competence, your own competence in your own area, and also increase the degree of confidence you have in decision-making processes. And so I learned the lesson in life from one of those places that I worked, I won't mention, it was one of those places you pointed out, that when I became competent, and they needed me more than I needed them, then I had control, not them, you see. I could go in and tell the people I was working with, I'm taking off this afternoon, and didn't have to explain why, and nobody would say anything. But if I didn't have the competence, and I walked in, if I said I'm taking off, they said, well, you should give us a notice a week ahead of time, you see. And so I try to teach my students that for their own sake, it's important to develop their confidence and their abilities. Not in the sense of making a dollar, because that would automatically flow in if you do all of this. And is that a response to your question?
Yes, that's a response.
But that's okay.
I think you're still unique. You said you used to be considered unique, but I think we've still got unique.
I think he sounds like a marketer when he's talking about
that
target
right?
marketing.
You gotta get him in your
I'll tell you
department.
about that a
Yeah,
little
just
bit
one quick
Sure.
sentence. Because she said that when I came out of the Army 40, I don't know, way back then, we had the GI Bill, and I had to go, and I wanted to go to college. And so at that time, you were obliged to take an aptitude test with the VA. So I went down the local VA in Providence. I sat down. They gave me a piece of paper, question on. I filled out the blanks. Then I presented it to the individual that would record the responses. He says, "My God," he says, "Mr. So-and-so," he said that it is excellent, 99 percentile in business. You listen very carefully, and 20 percentile in science. He said, "You should go into business." I says, "Why do that? I already know all there is to know about business. Science is what I don't know." What a mistake. And that's what happened. You see? So when you said that, it triggered that. Yes.
Well, maybe you should swap departments.
You should ask where the mistake that you spoke of is.
I was hoping that I'd be sitting next to her in Schneider.
Tony, you just finished, what, 6 years here, or 7, or however long it took you to get to through your master's.
We won't count.
Won't count them. What is your assessment of how well this campus met your needs, and is it a unique campus?
The first question sounds rather loaded, actually.
That's
I
true.
should be very
You've
careful
already
about
graduated,
that.
that's okay.
But there are things like letters of recommendation and such. No, I won't hold anything back. I'd say that the campus is unique. There's no question about it. The ways in which it's unique, I think, could be argued. Is it unique for the respecting differences or respecting diversity? I would say there's a cosmetic uniqueness involved in that, but I don't think it goes much deeper at this point. But perhaps the first step in change in that way is at least recognizing the difference. They always say that the first step to a cure is recognizing the problem. Perhaps that's what we're beginning to do very, very gradually now. I'd warn students coming here about using too much emphasis on the what was the word that you used, Gabe? The personality of the campus. I don't think, if somebody asked me to define that, I would really defer on that. I don't think it'd be fair to define a personality for UW-Eau Claire. I would rather stress the academic strengths of the university, which I think would exceed, and the contrast what you said would match UW-Eau Claire against any other state school in Wisconsin, for that means in the Midwest, really. We're strong in many departments here, and I think would hold our own against many schools in that way. I think what we're seeing now as we move into the 1990s is in academia is many departments or many fields beginning to diversify so greatly, beginning to fragment, I should say, rather than diversify, not to be confused with what I said earlier, beginning to fragment so substantially that you can find, students can find niches within any field that they're interested in, that I think that they could excel within right here at UW-Eau Claire and take that value beyond the university, reflecting very good things back here. As far as the mission of the school goes, I think I'd agree almost completely with what you said, that we're in the process of not teaching students some process-oriented task, but instead of that, helping students learn how to learn for themselves. In other words, the mission of a liberal arts college, something we're in the business of redefining, that issue of the baccalaureate. I'm not going to touch where that's going to be should we come back in 5 years and figure out exactly what is a baccalaureate, what is the degree, and what value is it to students, and how do they go about that. The diversity or the fragmentation that occurs within disciplines, I think, is evident in what's going on in redefining that baccalaureate right now. We're stressing more and more experimentation, which I think is perhaps the best thing that has happened to Eau Claire since 1916, quite literally, and where we've come in the very near recent past, I hope, is some indication of where we're headed in the future.
Do you think that the delivery of education is, in your recollection, principally lecture type, or did you run into some unusual methods of teaching, even getting out of the classroom or whatever?
Unfortunately, I think it's still rooted substantially in lecture. I say that unfortunately. I think now I just criticized looking at the personality of the campus, I'm going to say the personality of the faculty will change greatly in the near future, just by the fact of retirements. Less human lifespan increases substantially in the near future. We will be witnessing many retirements. We'll be witnessing a drastic change in faculty, some of which I think we've seen very recently. It's going to affect different departments in different ways. But I think there'll be a move from purely that lecture of pumping in knowledge to students, sharing with them whatever wealth of knowledge individuals believe or do have, and instead helping them to find knowledge, perhaps if there is such a thing as knowledge or truth or wisdom, with all capital letters, of course, finding that on their own rather than sharing it with them or showing it to them. Ways in which, outside the classrooms, with materials, research materials, archives, and such that we have here at Eau Claire, the resources in our libraries, and not only in that, in our environment as I look around outside here, hoping that they can find that on their own. I'm very hopeful for that in the future, in the near future.
Gretchen, you've been here since, what, the middle 80s? Or
Right, 83.
83. What's been your experience here?
I guess when I think of Eau Claire, I went to Madison as an undergrad, so I can compare it with a school that had 40,000 people. And one thing I somewhat disagree. I think there is a culture here, or there is a personality. I think faculty generally are a little bit more caring and more concerned than they would be out of Madison. Sometimes that concerns me a little bit, because sometimes I think students come here, they view it as sort of a safe haven away from some of the ills in the real world, and that concerns me, because I don't think that's necessarily what a university should be. But I do think that our strength, the fact that, I think about my undergraduate, I don't remember ever going in and talking to one of my professors. They were never available, they were never around, and that's encouraged. I mean, you can come in and talk to any of your professors anytime. Sometimes I think, again, that is a problem, because I hate to say this, but sometimes I think we kind of shelter them and maybe baby them a little bit too much. I've had some students that say they're not really prepared for what the real world is all about. I mean, it can be pretty mean out there, and they're not prepared for that, because everyone here is so caring, so concerned, and so on. So it's been kind of a shock for them when they go out there. I agree with basically the things that people were talking about. I think that we have a lot of strengths. I think that our teaching style is going to change as people retire, as technology improves. I guess I'd like to see us open it up to everyone. So,
If you could sweep the slate clean and redesign the whole campus, and if you could encourage a different kind of teaching style, and you had unlimited access to technology, and I guess so. What I'm interested in is what could be done. At the same time, what do you think is going to happen over the next few years, given the way technology is changing and the communications that are being more and more available, and the massive storage on computers and international network links and so on. CeCelia, have you? I'm not sure what the teaching style is in your department. But,
yeah, I think that probably the most important thing for education in the future is relationships between faculty and students. I think especially, and in relation to the technology, I think we can't put all our eggs in one basket and look at technology as different students are attracted here, as different faculty are attracted here. I would like to see something, and I'm kind of thinking out loud, I would like to see something like an apprenticeship model where students come in as freshmen. I would connect with a small group of students and follow them throughout a baccalaureate program of education. And I guess I would disagree with Gabe. I think process is very important in education. I mean, I want the students to know how to do something, or how to think, or how to make decisions, or how to think critically. Those to me are processes, and I don't want to teach them solely the outcomes or the end of something, i.e., and I may be misinterpreting a bit what he said, but I don't want them to know just how to put something together, because I agree, I think that's probably vocational preparation, but I want them to learn processes. I want them to learn learning processes and teaching processes and thinking processes and problem solving and decision making processes and all of that, and I would like to do that with a limited group of students going throughout some kind of time span, and helping them perhaps arrange some courses and some sharing my own lifestyle and my own practice as a professional, and somehow socialize them into what it's like to be a scholar. And I think I'm the scholar, and I think the students are scholars as well. So
how could you implement that in practical terms?
Yeah, I know that's pretty pretty idealistic,
well,
isn't it?
I think there are ways that have been found, but I wonder how you could do it in your area.
I just kind of realistically looking, instead of requiring 128 credits, maybe we require 100 credits and look at giving them 25 or 30 credits in their life with me, however that would be designed. So maybe it would be a blend of structured classroom kind of coursework kinds of things, and maybe there would be a fair amount of credit allotment that would be given to their work with me and their thinking with me and their practicing with me, etc. Whether that's research or clinical practice or whatever.
But it would be outside the classroom, presumably.
It may or it may not be. That would need to be, kind of designed based on what they need and what I have to offer.
Other ideas on different ways of approaching teaching?
Can I just, before I express some ideas, may I make a comment on the comments of my comment? Well, first with my colleague Gulig, my point I wanted to make was when I said personality, that each one of us has a personality. And if we go into an institution we feel comfortable, it'd be easier for us to overcome any other processes, intellectual processes. We go into an institution in which we feel uncomfortable in that sense.
But how would you, if you came into UW-Eau for the first time and tried to measure personality,
you know how do
you do
I
that?
tell my students, I want to respond here also, and I might respond to this question. No, I'm very quick. I'll make this very quick. How I do it is I encourage my students. I said, if you're going to go to especially grad school, you should do it for undergraduate. I didn't do this. You say, I went through all the negative experiences in graduate school and so forth, and then for analysis of that experiences, I come up with what I'm saying in a moment. I encourage the students, before you choose a graduate school, we go through a process of how to go about this in terms of just in terms of getting initial information. Then to visit the school, to walk around the campus day and night, to visit and walk around the campus, visit the school, visit the department, talk to the secretary, talk to the professors, talk with the chairman of the department, ask the chairman, and ask him questions in terms of his simple questions. If I was going, as an example, if I was going to come here and go into the business school or the nursing school, I would walk in as a prospective nursing student. I would walk in, or a business student, walk around the department, and observe students and talk to the secretary, talk to the people that do the cleaning, and then enter the chairman's office. And what?
You could enter even.
Well, I would.
You know what I mean?
I would make an appointment.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But
That's
you know what I
right.
mean.
That's right. Exactly. Precisely.
Or it could be the chairwoman
Or
as
chair.
well.
Chairperson, yes.
See, I grew up back. Oh, yeah. That's right. You see. Oh, let's not get into that now. No, for the moment, I'm prepared. But the point is just that you walk in and you ask the very simple questions. Introduce yourself, and you ask a very simple question that you're interested in nursing, and in a particular aspect of nursing. And you say, how many students do you have in the nursing program? And he mutters, well, let me see. Calls the secretary and says, so-and-so, how many students do we have? That says something. And then you ask him a question, how many of the kids have started out graduated? And he mumbles around, he says some number. Then you ask, how many of those kids went on to graduate programs? And if he doesn't know, that means he really doesn't care, you see. So you can learn a lot by asking questions. And then what I would also do, I would tell the young undergraduate, is that if you're interested in professional school, it's important that you do research as an undergraduate, publishable research. And then I would ask, again, the chairman, who does research in your department? And visit with those individuals who do research and talk with them, see if there's an overlap of personality, and try to ascertain if there's a possibility that you may have an opportunity to work with this individual, and so you can develop a mentor relationship. And if you do that, if you work with an individual on research and develop a mentor relationship, and if your research is published with your advisor and as a co-author, your chances of going to select graduate schools have skyrocketed dramatically. How do I know that? Because I sent from our department, I've done exactly that. And the kids I've sent to graduate school from this university, my first student went to Stanford. One of my students he finished there several years ago in graduate school. Another one just finished at Caltech 4 months ago. And I can go around, and I sent a kid to work with me research to Harvard. And I can list a whole, from this, no, what I'm saying is that this kid who went to Harvard was from another university, did research with me, but I sent a kid from this school to Harvard, also a medical school, who was a student of mine. The point is this, those are niches I'm talking about. If a professor does research, and which can involve an undergraduate, and all of my research that I published in the scientific journals involves undergraduates here, every bit of my research. And all of those kids that have been involved have gone on to select grad schools. That's the point I meant by uniqueness. And also by personality. I would investigate this.
You're talking about the academic quality of UW-Eau Claire, and I don't dispute that at all. What I'm concerned with is that you suggested if we could, maybe you're talking about academic personality. And what I'm talking about, if you came here not knowing anything about UW-Eau Claire and just looked at the people that you saw, didn't bother with academics specifically, but just looked, is this a nice place? Does it snow here? Does it rain here? Who are the students here? What does the face, if there is such a thing, of UW-Eau Claire look like? I would warn people very clearly about using that as a measure of this institution in 1992. Okay, then we misunderstood.
No. And then I would respond to her. Before I do, what bothers me about some of the responses, not specifically bothers me, is that what is education? Let me tell you a little story that may or may not be interesting. A few years ago, a colleague of mine at an Eastern university that shall go unnamed for reasons you'll understand, hopefully. My colleague was recognized as an excellent teacher, had students up to 500 kids in his class in teaching the course that he taught. But he recognized that the university that he was located in, the teaching was uniformly lousy. That was his phraseology. And so he had made many visits with the president of the university, and in conversations, he said, I wonder why these kids come here and pay $15,000, $20,000 a year, and yet expose themselves to this uniformly lousy teaching experience. And the president said, that's an interesting question. He's wondered about that also, apparently. And so my friend was the president authorized a committee, which my friend was on, and the committee consisted of professors at the university who looked into the matter. Why do students come in and pay all this money to go and then expose themselves to lousy teaching? You know, the result was very fascinating. something that was intuitively evident, and this is part of the educational process. When the students were queried over a period of time after the investigation was complete, the dominant response was, yes, we know. We know, we've heard about in the community that prior to coming here, that the lecture process, the lecturing was typically not necessarily of high quality. But the reason why they go there is because the educational process typically, to some significant measure, takes place outside of the classroom, and that's where we fail here.
Well, I think we all agree that lecturing isn't
No,
the
no,
best way to deliver
No, but,
information.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this is, and the kid said that we come here because we know that other bright kids paid $20,000 to come here, and we learn from each other. That was the key. You see, we're learning from each other outside the classroom, and that was the dominant response.
That doesn't exist here. I don't.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and in fact, that's when you ask the weaknesses. That's the point that, and the question you initially asked. I would say that's one of our main problems is that our youngsters think, by and large, to some significant measure, that the education process is within a 50-minute confined period in the lecture hall. You see, and outside of that is happy time apparently. And I try to tell the kids that this is. I said, look, during the ancient Grecian times, the dominant, lecturing was the dominant mode, and the people, the students at that time, would take the lectures down verbatim. So during the Grecian times, in antiquity, take the lectures down verbatim, and the reason for that was because books were not readily available. I've always wondered, this may annoy my colleagues, but I must tell them, I've always wondered why, since the advent of Gutenberg, why we had lectures. Why we have lectures? Because all we need is a good library, you see. And I've come to the conclusion, and this is where I may have to leave, I've come to the conclusion that the reason why we have lectures is because it gives adults jobs. And there's nothing wrong in that. Because if you look at institutions, and most of our institutions, there's a purported reason that we give to the public, and there's another reason. The other reason, which I think is the most important reason, it gives adults jobs, you see. Otherwise, I have no other way of rationalizing away lecturing in the
When they can go and read the book.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Gretchen, what can you do in a classroom besides lecture?
Well, I think what you were talking about, breaking things up into groups, I think projects, working on writing skills, oral communication skills. I think lecturing personally is kind of boring, to sit there and listen to someone for 50 minutes. When I teach, I always tell my students, hey, this is, to me, the reason you come here is because you can contribute. I remember in a class that I had at Madison, there were 125 people there. Someone in the class raised their hand to ask a professor a question, and the professor stopped the class and said, look, I do not address questions during class. If you have a question, you can see me after class, blah, blah, blah. The kid is sinking into his chair. No one ever asked a question again. And to me, that's wrong. I mean, I think it has to be a two-way kind of give and take, and especially if you have more non-traditional students in your class, they have a lot of life experiences to bring in. They make the class more interesting. It's too passive to sit there.
Was it possible to have assigned books and articles and so on, and make it known that what's going to happen in class is a discussion of it?
You try that, though. I mean, I think most people do that. I don't think, I guess you're talking about how do you foster a love of learning? You were talking about the love of being a scholar or something. Sometimes I think kids don't have that. They, maybe they're just trying to get a degree because they think they get this paper and then it lets them have a job. But how can you get people to love to learn? That's a tough one.
Students need to hear you think out loud. I think sometimes we think as faculty that we need to give students this finished product of something that, and we don't share the process that we went through to come up with this.
You think we think, well, we have to test them on it, so we have to give them certain things. So, well, this could be a multiple choice essay or a question, or this could be an essay question or something. Instead of, again, we're so concerned with how we're going to measure that result instead of, as you said, talking about the concept behind it and so on. I don't know.
But there's what we're doing, I think, is all the things that you've said are true, but there's another problem, and that to look at this quite literally is with class sizes. So you said 125 in Madison, and there are many classes here that approach that. You could call it lecture, or you could call it crowd control to some extent. And how do you have a discussion with 125 125 people. That's extremely difficult with student loads. I don't know what they are for all of you specifically, but I know for me this semester they were in upper division classes, senior level classes. They were upwards of 40 to 50 students in a senior level class, a class that should be designed around discussion, that should be designed around interest. But it's extremely difficult, not just for me or for somebody teaching a class like that. It's also extremely difficult for the students. You break that down into a 50-minute period. What does that give people to share their views or to share their understanding? There's got to be a modification of the structure to take place before we can implement more effectively the new methods that we all agree need to be employed. Part of that, I think, is we have to teach students how to, not teach them how to learn, that sounds far too paternalistic, but teach them how to find information on their own. In teaching history in the history department, I would much rather make this a hands-on study. What I'm doing when I lecture is I'm sharing with them my research. They ask me why I don't talk about things in the textbook. I think, Gabe, you'd like this. I said, because I could trust you all read and can do that fairly well, at least to be here. But a much more hands-on activity, again, with a group of 50 and 60. The archivists here don't appreciate us taking 50 and 60 into archives on any given day. And it's very difficult to do that. There has to be, some structure modification that takes place. Go ahead.
That structure, that's a very important point, and I think there's a limitation to what we can do. This is a state institution, and as a result, because it's a state institution, then we're obliged to follow certain set of pattern of regulations that one is not necessarily exposed to in another university of this size that is private. And so consequently, there's only a certain amount of alleviation that we can expect in that direction. There's a structural, I don't want to use the word deficiency. No, it's not a question, no, it's not a question for it. I'll give you a simple example. Look, in the classroom, from my interpretation, in the classroom, not much learning goes on, if any, if there isn't spontaneity. That is fundamental. And one can show this very effectively by walking into the classroom with a sheet of paper, turning your back to the kids, and writing on the wall for 50 minutes. You can rest assured there wasn't much transference of whatever you intended to transfer. And so spontaneity is the key, is one of the keys to effective communication. Now, however, you stop and think. If you're spontaneous, you're susceptible to saying and doing things, again spontaneously, which may not be in accordance with certain set of regulations of the state. You're a human being. And then every time that the administration or the central administration, local administration sends a rule down that should be observed in the classroom, to that measure, spontaneity is diminished. The educational process is diminished to that measure. And at the present time, from my perspective, there are more rules, there are an incredible number of rules. There's certain things you cannot or cannot say or imply or even think or hint in the classroom. And so, in order to protect yourself, you tend to become very rigid, sheet of paper, go on the blackboard. And as I tell the kids, all I have to do, and which I don't do incidentally, because I am spontaneous, and I made the decision that being spontaneous, I will make a mistake someday, it's going to cost, but I'm willing to take that.
What kind of things can't you say?
Just read, for instance, you have to be careful in terms of what I just called chairman or women, and anything that could be construed as sexist. And I have 70 kids in one class and 46 in another, and they all interpret things differently. So if I say something that can be construed, I'd have to address that in some forum, and I may be obliged to address that. As a simple example. In fact, we can go deeper into that aspect, but that's the point. And so, as soon as when you introduce rules, every time you introduce a rule in the classroom, an instructor, every time you say that something cannot be done, you curtail something, you diminish spontaneity. And when you diminish spontaneity in the classroom, you diminish the educational process. Because then, in order for a man that has a family I exclude myself from that category, but the typical individual's man or woman that has responsibility and wants to maintain his or her position here, the safest thing to do is to walk in the classroom with a sheet of paper, turn his or her back, write on the board for 50 minutes, and be the first one out. Because then you fulfill your obligations to the state of Wisconsin, and you've come out clean during that lecture.
So do you think people teach to their teaching evaluations? Is that what you're saying?
No, that
They
isn't what
don't
I'm saying.
wanna
No,
do
no,
something?
that's this is protecting themselves against misinterpretation. You see? Yeah.
But I think misinterpretation is part of learning with students,
Oh, no, no,
so
no,
it's
no.
okay.
No, no,
I'm
excuse me, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying, what I do is purely spontaneous, and I resolve. I says, I'm going to make mistakes, so this is spontaneous, and I'm willing to take whatever that's brought in front of me. Yeah, I agree. I know I'm very spontaneous, as my students would attest to, and I feel very strongly about that. The day that I am not spontaneous, I will walk out of the classroom and leave Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. But however, many professors, we talk about the good environment. There are a number of professors, number of teachers here at this university that protect themselves, have diminished their spontaneity. We can say all the good things we want to say, but they diminished it because they have obligations at home, a family and children, in order to protect themselves. It's the safest thing to do is to in a monotone. Exactly, the easiest thing to do is a monotone in front of the class, right on the board, and leave after be the first one out before you trample.
Well, I think
Is that right?
we are kind of talking about political correctness, I think, here. How do you balance an interest in respecting diversity and not being racist and not being sexist? I don't think anybody really wants to be that, but it's apparently created a situation where there are certain things that are viewed as sexist, racist, and so you try not to say those things or do those things. How do you balance spontaneity or freedom of expression?
I think you have to be sensitive. I guess I don't have problems being not racist or sexist in class. You know,
This problem will be with us for a long time unless we're very open. Everyone is open on all sides. I have yet to meet the person in this world who does not have a measure of unhealthiness in it. You call it racism. And as I speak with Indian, I have a lot of students come visit my office. A number of students, your so-called students who are not traditional, that is, that come from elsewhere, and local native students, and even local kids from Eau Claire. And we discuss these issues, and I'm very open with them, and they're very open with me. The day, most all of them admit that when they go home in their politalk, they say those things which are not appropriate to say outside. And I said, you're human. I said, show me the person who doesn't. The key, I said, is this. The day that we can talk about it openly, all of these issues, and jest about it, and laugh about it, you see, is the day we'll be able to cleanse our souls and develop a better society. As long as we say, don't be sensitive, don't talk about it, look, I know how I was treated when I came in '76. I won't go into that detail. When I was a kid in high school, a very quick story, when I was a kid in high school, my teacher in geometry said to me, in front of the class, the first day, she said, I don't like your ethnic kind, in front of everybody. And no, I didn't mind. I'll tell you how I responded. I was sitting in class as a kid, 10th grade kid. I said, and you're not going to get anything more than a C in this course, regardless how well you do. So I said to myself, I'm an immigrant kid. I can't go home and tell my father and my mother they're immigrants. They're from elsewhere. And they would say, you must have done something in school, and I would get appropriately punished for it. How I handled it is this: the teacher has a problem. It isn't my problem. And then I said, I'm going to show her. And in that particular course, I did every homework problem correct for the whole year. I worked hard. I had every exam 100%. I ended up with a C. Now I look back, I hope that maybe some other teachers would have done that to me, you see, because I goofed off in other classes. The point I'm making is this, is that you don't, the problem exists with those that respond in that way. But understand the point. Once we can talk about this and joke about it, there's only certain...
That's funny. I don't think that's funny.
No, joke, not about, joke about, not, I don't mean about that, but I mean, joke about each other, joke about each other. When I say joke, let me phrase this. There are certain jokes we can say in our society, certain jokes we can't not say. Yeah, certain ethnic groups we can hit, and certain we can hit. My comment is the day that we can do all equally well is the day that I think we'll be able to cleanse us all. That you say, that's the day we can do all equally well. You know, that's, and I've said that on television. I've committed myself right there. Until that point, yeah.
I don't know about that. I think maybe to take just the opposite perspective, the day that we don't have to joke about any, the day we make fun of the things we're most afraid of.
Yeah, I think
And
when they're not funny.
When the,
I
yes,
don't think
right.
that's funny. Yeah, I think we have to be
And-
sensitive. It's just a matter
No,
of
it's not- I don't mean-
understanding other people's
No.
differences and accepting them.
Well, we all have differences, and you see the things, we all have differences. And the differences are unique and they're amusing. I don't mean to say they make fun of, they're amusing. I find my differences, I find fascinating.
Interesting.
Well,
Interesting.
I think what,
And we can express that difference. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
what I noticed, I was in Louisiana for 8 years, and I think maybe what Gabe might be saying, I don't know, you can correct me, but down there,
I'm not
people,
laughing at people. I don't mean
no,
that.
they're laughing at themselves, at
Exactly.
themselves.
That's precisely.
Because, in fact, what they were doing was laughing at the fact that they were brought up racist, and they recognize it, and they were talking to people. I mean, I was at the Louisiana State Archives, about 40 people, half black and half white. We all ate together in the cafeteria, and what was amusing was each person recognizing their own racist feelings and trying to overcome it, but realizing they weren't doing very well, and saying this to people of the opposite race, and they seeing the same thing and finding it amusing how hard it was to struggle against it. Not finding the other person's race funny, finding their own struggle funny. I think maybe that's what
That's
Gabe was
precisely,
saying.
yeah. You laugh at yourself. That's it. I
Right.
don't mean that. That's
Yeah,
precisely.
so that where
yeah.
you get to the point where it's no longer everybody watching everybody else,
Yes.
whether they're going to say a certain word or not. I do wonder, is it possible and is it appropriate in the classes to discuss these kinds of feelings and these kinds of struggles?
It's kind of hard to discuss
necessary to do that.
Hmm?
I think it's necessary to do that with students in the class, and that's why maybe Gabe is talking about the rules kind of that are handed down or that we think we're under. I mean, that's what students need to hear. They need to hear us think and us discuss where the processes that we came through. They don't need the final product only. They need
Right.
the whole process of how we got to where we are. And our upbringing, whatever it was, and it probably included lots of different negative things, they need to hear that and how we're dealing with that and how we continue to deal with that. That's the 20 credits that I want with a small group of students.
So do you think it's kind of difficult here, though? I think it's important, but because we are so homogeneous, I think there are a lot of people here that have never run into someone really from another culture, from another. I mean, and the times that I do have someone from someplace else, from another country or from another racial background, it's always one person versus 45 or 50, and you don't want to put that one person on the spot either.
I mean, when I look at my own background,
Yeah.
it's much different than someone whose skin color is black in my classroom or Hispanic. I mean, if I told you my background, it would be very unlike whatever normal is, and so I don't think we are homogeneous. I think we all have very different families and thoughts, and, it's more than just the four cultural
Sure,
minority
okay.
groups. So I guess I don't think we are homogeneous. I think we reflect where this university is, and that's okay, and let's not be so concerned about kind of meeting the cultural diversity mandate. Let's look at how we're different, and we're all very heterogeneous.
Yeah, I understand what you're
But
saying.
how do you go about, without taking the mandate or the rules, as have been mentioned here, and implement that and say, let's honestly step back and take a look at this without some kind of structure? Because people just, if you give this to them in a mission, in the catalog that students receive when they come here saying, this is what you're to do, maybe I'm too pessimistic. I don't believe that it'll be accomplished. I don't believe that that'll be done.
Or done in the right way, maybe.
Perhaps. I would disagree with you also. I think that the Eau Claire University, Wisconsin-Eau Claire, right now is a much more homogeneous place. That students that I see come here attempt to become homogeneous rather than the opposite, rather than attempting to become diverse. Because, to use some cliches, perhaps they view that there's some safety
That's
in
right.
homogeneity, and until we can prove to them that there's safety and diversity as well, something that is not taking place here,
Homogeneous. The
but they're
students
attempting
they're
to become
homogeneous
that.
by skin color, perhaps.
And they're attempting to become homogeneous in
But is
all
that
but
what
every
we're
other
telling them to
aspect
do?
of their life. And I think that's part of the reason that we're at fault, is because we're not showing them that it's safe to be more diverse, to be more, until we can do that, we can't expect them to be more diverse. If they are, then we have a great deal to learn from them as well.
They are very diverse. I think they're very diverse. And maybe what you're saying is that we're putting our expectations for them to be homogeneous onto them, and they can't be diverse because we're placing our expectations of homogeneity onto them, and we don't recognize their diversity,
I think
perhaps.
CeCelia is also saying that there's a lot more kinds of diversity than just skin color and ethnic.
Oh, true.
There's
Very
young and
true.
old
But-
and male and female.
But
and-
again, what I see students doing is attempting to become as homogeneous as possible when they arrive.
Mhm.
Oh, no question. I mean,
Wanna fit
students
in, right.
coming from, you know,
So maybe our society is telling them to be homogeneous, and we're products of our society, so we're
True.
telling the students to be
True.
homogeneous because that's the way to be successful in this world,
I'd
perhaps,
agree
or
with that.
something. But I don't think inherently they are homogeneous.
We're getting a little...
What's different? I mean, you look around. Look. Just a moment. You look around at these students. I don't know. I don't understand this conversation. Look around at these students, and ask and if there are as variegated as we've indicated, then we don't have, when they leave the classroom, typically, do you see areas or regions, or are there discussion groups amongst them? What is a general activity after they leave the classroom? That's an important question, because that general activity, that general activity after they leave the classroom, collectively speaking, is an indication of the degree of homogeneity. And if I saw, if I saw substantial numbers going into certain areas under discussion groups and varied discussion groups and meeting various discussion groups and pursuing pursuing those pursuing discussions, not well. If they're doing, let me just put it this way. Simply put, look at the characteristic behavior, the general behavior of the students when they leave the classroom, and if you find that the general behavior is relatively unique, that they all tend to do similar kinds of things at similar times, then I think this would be give you a measure of the homogeneity of the thinking. They may do it for reasons that you've indicated, to feel secure and safe.
If they're staying around
And-
discussing
yeah.
ethnic baseball players
Okay, but
from
the-
all different groups,
It's-
like you were saying earlier.
It's difficult. You asked the question earlier, why don't we start these discussions in the classroom? I keep on saying the classroom is not necessarily the best place for it. You want to start these discussions, that one would hopefully have a program in the dormitories. Visit those places. Professors visit those places, have discussion groups on a given issue. You choose the issue. And then and try to develop that kind of atmosphere. Now, to develop that kind of atmosphere, you need people that are sensitive, people that are willing to go beyond themselves. But unfortunately, in our society today, at the universities, not only at this one, this is very characteristic, the common attitude is there isn't a degree of commitment in the professorial staff as there was when I was a student back in the 50s and early 60s. An individual now teaching his attitudes are very different, is what's in it for me financially? And so I remember very well when I was an undergraduate at the school that I attended, the professors once a month in the courses that I attended, many of the professors would invite us for tea and cookies at their home on Sunday afternoon for 2 hours for discussions at their homes. You see? And they had a degree of commitment to the university and to the environment and the student. The question we should ask is, what degree of commitment do we have? Not for what us professors have towards the students. And I don't want to hear that I'm sensitive, I meet their needs and so forth. I want to ask the question, aside from your regular 14 hours a week, have you visited the dormitories, formed groups and talked to students? What extracurricular activity have you done how else have you participated with students outside of the classroom environment? And so we don't have much of that from my observations. What we have are people, in my view, regardless of what is said, people whose commitment is not as deep as it was, from my perceptions, to what it was back in the 50s and early 60s. We have people now whose commitment is to them, not to the institution, much more to them than to the institution. And when they keep on giving me good words, my comment is, what have you done for this institution and for the students? And I say that from the perspective that some of us have put in 40 to 60 hours a week with students without compensation to teach, to do research with them for several years at a time and send them out to graduate school. And so, yes, we can have an institution that we can be proud of, but before we have it, the individuals or the professors that teach here must extend their commitment beyond the classroom and without the thought of demanding excessive compensation.
So why do you think that feeling isn't there anymore?
Well, that's the key to this whole process, that it isn't there. Now this discussion is getting real. Did you hear that? No, because, because in the classroom we get paid. No, in the classroom we're getting paid.
But we just
and it's
decided we
formal.
don't want to lecture,
No.
so let's discuss it in the classroom instead of having to go to the dorm. I mean, there's
Well-
nothing wrong with going to the dorm, but let's turn the classroom into that kind of a
Maybe that's what
In
they
my
should be
department-
learning.
In my department, I don't think that would be available because we have a syllabus that we have to
You
follow.
can read the book.
But,
They all
yeah,
can read.
but
Right?
But if I
They need
tell
to
it-
talk
I know
with
that.
us.
I may happen to agree with you, but I know that the structure of the structure of the university is a state structure. The structure of the you're controlled by rules and regulations which eventually come down from the state legislature and board of
You
regents.
can control your class. You can do whatever you want in
No,
your
that
class.
is not necessarily true. If
Other
I-
than saying a few things
No,
that you
no,
talked
no,
about
no,
earlier.
no.
Yeah.
And those things, that's, if I do not follow a given syllabus for that semester,
But put it into your syllabus that you're going to.
I can't, no, the syllabus is designed by the department.
Oh, see, in
It's
our
designed-
department, it's
designed
not.
by the
Everyone
department.
has control.
Designed by
We
the
do our
department,
own. We control what goes on during our
Oh, well
50
then,
or an hour and 50
maybe
minutes or
can I
whatever.
join you guys, and you need another tenured professor there or something?
Yeah, see, we
Look at
can,
that.
we can, you're the same way, right? You can do what you want, talk about the topics you want, emphasize what you want, de-emphasize
general
other things.
guidelines.
No, even in ours, there aren't, I mean, you,
General guidelines,
Well,
you could talk about
well, it
astronomy and-
should make sense given the context. I mean, people sign up for a course, they're expecting
the basic
somewhat-
guidelines.
Right, yeah, but other than that, it doesn't make any difference.
Kids that take our course expect to go to professional schools, so they want to cover a certain amount of material, not to pass a professional examination.
But there are issues related to that material that you don't have to take to the dorm. It seems like you could discuss them in the classroom
But,
and to
okay.
just account 60 hours of time. I mean, the classroom is the time to do that with students.
Okay, I'm not objecting to that. I would love to do, I'd love to be given the opportunity, but I also say, how much more impression one would make, what a deeper impression one would, if you do visit the class outside on your time. Now, one of the first things I noticed when I came here was that I wanted to go to a football game my first year, UW football game, UWC football game up to the park. And so I inquired, I says, you notice I've been in the past that had football teams, encourage their professors to go, and without charge, they wanted them there, because it was a subtle control mechanism. And I was told, the state legislature here, I don't know if it's true or not, but I was told the state legislature insists that professors pay also. And I learned that was a signal to me that, that there's a separation. In other words, the students and instructors were artificially separated. And I would encourage, if I was in a leadership position, I would encourage professors to go to basketball games, football games, and so forth, and that would act as a subtle crowd control.
See, I think
Yeah.
I
You
think,
see the point? And then
maybe it's
communication
your
between.
department or something, but personally, I feel that I know so many students. I mean, I know more people than when I was in school, my professors ever knew. And there's so many opportunities to get involved if someone wants to be involved with club advising and, just a multitude of things. So if someone doesn't do it, that's their own fault, I guess.
I'm talking unofficially. I don't mean unofficially. Because that's how, in a sense, my schooling was.
But you can do anything you want unofficially.
No, I'm not saying what. No, the point. I'm saying that the measure,
Yeah.
the measure of interaction, the measure of concern, is not the words we use. I measure it by the amount of by that which is done on an unofficial basis between two parties, the instructor and the student. And I'm merely saying this, the degree of commitment is measured by that, and I'm merely saying this, that degree of commitment from my observation has been diminished since the 50s, dramatically diminished. And we are now more concerned than the 50s about our remuneration and what does it mean to me and what am I getting out of it.
Do you think that's unique to universities? I mean, some people
Oh,
might
no,
say
it
that's
isn't. No,
the
no, it
culture
isn't.
in general, that
That may
in
very well be,
business or
but,
whatever. What do you think?
but we always say that universities are unique and,
I'd ask a question, is that Is what you're describing a factor of faculty, or is it a factor of administration imposing this or making it too dangerous from your perceptions on what it is that faculty can or can't do, should or shouldn't do with their students? I mean, I'd agree with you strongly that interaction outside the classroom is a very valuable part of the educational process. It shows people that professors are real people too. Most of them have pulses and body temperatures above 90 degrees, which is, it's a good sign. But, you know, where is this imposition coming from? Is it some administrative oversight, guilt, fault, or is it the fault of simply the profession? I get a lot of trouble here that the profession is aging, which makes somebody going into the job market very hopeful.
I don't know. That's a very difficult question.
I think so.
Let the young ladies respond to that. Let the young ladies respond to that.
I guess, to be honest with you, I don't feel constricted in what I do in my classroom. I feel very comfortable talking about issues related to the content, and I feel very committed. And I would challenge someone to say that, to mark my commitment by the number of hours that I do or something, because I don't feel the perception of being constricted. I think as much as Gabe is expressing, but perhaps I'm naive. I don't know.
Class. I mean, different course ideas. I mean, it's encouraged to create a course if you want to teach something that isn't even on the catalog. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that can be done.
But it might have something to do with the aging faculty. I don't know. I think that's
it has
worth.
a lot to do with that. I mean,
and I know we're kind of running out of time.
Well, I guess it occurs to me, Gabe, you were talking earlier before we started about a whole different movement within physics, a different way of viewing the world, I guess. Couldn't that be the core of a course? I mean, I would think it would come up in one of the courses or another. I would think a debate among the students, you know, give them information about all of this and get like we're doing here, get a discussion going about it.
I've been thinking, we tend to be rather rigid. I don't mean us in terms of cost structure, so forth, where I come from. And I express, when it's appropriate in my astronomy class and when it's appropriate in my physics class, I express that during appropriate periods. But I'm more concerned than just expressing it to my astronomy class in appropriate times for my physics class. I'm concerned about the educational process. I want to be able to at least try to touch as many people as possible. Not because I'm right, I don't believe that. I'm a questioning man. And I'm always willing to listen to anybody and everybody, and I mean that very seriously, because I learn. Because when I express my ideas, as it's reflected back, I can see errors and make adjustments and changes. The point I'm making is what I like to reach is many students. And a way to do that is not necessarily through my restricted class time. And I've been thinking very seriously as we discuss this that I may very well spend give some lectures at this university on this very issue, public lectures.
Brown bags or
yeah,
something.
that sort of thing, or go up there on a hill and see if anybody's interested in that and give those lectures. And because the class time is another aspect. To me, the class is very sacred. It's a cardinal sin to subject the individuals in the class to your own personal beliefs and ideas. Yeah.
But you can raise them.
No, it's a cardinal sin. No, I do. I'll tell you why.
One of the most valuable student evaluations that I receive is I receive evaluations where students say, he got off task, he got off the topic of what was scheduled for the day, and he answered our questions because their questions weren't part of what was scheduled for that day, and that's part of the learning process, a very valuable part of the learning process.
Well, there are 50 kids in the classroom, 70 kids in the class, they're obliged to be there. If I have something important to say that's personal or my own beliefs, I can go in front of Schofield Hall, or that is an auditorium, and attract, if it's significant and it's worthwhile, it will attract an audience, you see? The point I'm making is that this is an audience that's obliged to be there, it's coerced to be there, and they're there for a specific purpose, for a certain body of knowledge. And so I feel very strongly. Another thing I understand we disagree. Another thing I feel strongly about is I think every instructor, and I'm also guilty of not doing this often, should express his political and economic philosophy and his background to the students at the beginning of the semester. Just who is this guy?
Yeah, I agree.
So that the students can make a measurement and Yeah, I make a measurement. Yes, can make a measurement. And, yeah, I strongly believe that.
But aren't you as part of the profession? Aren't your opinion? You're a human being. As part of this profession, and your opinions are part of you as a human being, and your opinions and personal philosophies, just as you suggested that you have to share with the students, are part of the profession, part of what the students are interested in being there. What makes you part of a valuable part of this profession? Part of that is, maybe this is a difference between, maybe this is a difference between science and humanities.
But my personal, I'm a human being. I try to be as objective as possible. I do have personal opinions, and I try to minimize that. And if it ever comes out, I'll say it's an editorial comment. If I make a comment to the class, it's an editorial comment that I specify, because I have that's been my background and my training. It's been my background and my training.
We need to recognize
Yeah.
that's a Western scientific kind of way of learning
Okay.
and teaching, and we're different, I think,
Okay.
in that way.
Not better or worse.
Not better
No,
or worse,
just
just
a-
different. That's why we're so diverse. We're very heterogeneous.
I'm always skeptic.
Yes.
I don't want to put value judgments on these things.
No.
Yeah.
Tony, did you have one last
I
comment
was
on
just
that, or?
going to say on objectivity, which is probably I'm going to get in trouble here, but probably the greatest piece of, it's the safest thing to attempt to hide behind. It doesn't exist. Objectivity doesn't exist I've yet to find a discipline in which objectivity exists, just as the truth.
But you
Should
can-
we find it, our purpose here is ended.
I think
And we
it's
can,
more obvious
I
in
agree.
history, maybe. Maybe if you look at history, which doesn't pretend to be a science, but then, I mean, even sciences.
Science. No, we're human beings. Science is subjective to some measure. I try to minimize subjectivity. I don't know of any scientist that claims pure objectivity. I know of no one in all the years I've worked. We're human beings. There's a measure of subjectiveness. So when I go to the telescope, I don't look out at the galaxies and take in everything they're sending out. I say, now look, galaxy, I just want to look at a particular frequency. Don't bother me with anything else, because I'm going to tune you out. And I do that, you see? And I become very subjective. Okay? I recognize that.
Okay, we have we're past our time, but we do have some more tape. What I'd like to do is conclude with just a short statement as a video time capsule. I'd like you simply to think of somebody watching this in 2050. What message would you like to send to that person, either about what we have now that should not be lost, what you hope will happen by 2050, if you have predictions, but we'll just, in a few words, what could you say to somebody watching this in 2050? Gretchen?
Oh, start with me.
We'll start with you. Go in reverse order here.
What would I say? I don't know. I guess you go first. I'll come back. I'll think here. You start. You've got an idea.
Do you want to start? I'll start. Did you want to say?
I just
Okay.
have an idea
Well, let
that I
me
would
alone,
ask
bye.
people to respect the struggle and the challenge that we're going through as we turn away from violence to the environment and to other people, and appreciate the struggle and challenges. And that's what I see as our dream, and that's what I would want people in 2050 to look back and recognize our use of violence to the environment and to other people, and appreciate our movement away from that, and
Right.
appreciate our struggle.
That's wonderful. Gabe?
To the people of 2050, I'm concerned about the quality of life that you're experiencing during this period, because I believe the major problem that we have as a global problem is the population explosion, and if this is not addressed prior to 2050, I believe that the quality of life that you're experiencing would be significantly different from the quality of life that some of us are experiencing during this period. And if we don't address that question, nature will do it for us. And when nature does it, and when nature addresses the question, it's unforgiving in its decision-making process. And so, and with that, I would hope that by the time that you people are observing this, that in the interim between now and then, that the humans on this planet have addressed that problem. Because if we haven't, there will be wars. Also, break up the fractionation of society, and wars because of the population density. And not only that, what really concerns me is that if we increase the population beyond the bounds that are reasonable in society, if we do that, then the only alternative that I can see is the onset throughout the globe of a totalitarian forms of government, in order to be able to distribute whatever is available to distribute to whatever's available to distribute. And once we have the totalitarian form of government throughout the globe, that would tend to diminish the creativity, because any creative individual would have difficulty in the totalitarian system. And once you diminish creativity and intelligence, then it would be an extremely rigid society that appears to be going nowhere but just accept into a potentially disastrous environment. Yeah.
Tony.
I guess I tell people viewing this in 2050 that if many of the problems that we're still experiencing now, or that we're experiencing now, you're experiencing those that have been mentioned, the environment, the population, if adequate solutions to those problems haven't been implemented, you would have us to fault, because this is the generation that's fully come to realize the importance of those problems. We can't look back to the generations previous to ours and fault them because they didn't understand to the extent that we understand these problems exist, but we do understand them now. At least we think we do. Maybe like Capsule in 2050 would disagree, but that we will be to fault if change doesn't occur.
I guess if I was going to talk to my students in 2050, the ones now, later on, I guess I would hope that they would have learned to take a few chances and risk a few things. Sometimes I think now they're not very risk-oriented. They're so afraid, and maybe it has to do with the economy. I think that's why you have so many business students, for example. And I hope that in 2050 they will have done a few things that they really wanted to do instead of just going into something just because they think there's a job there. I also hope that they learn that, and you were talking about money, I think money is important, but it's not the only thing in life. I think that you have to give in order to get back, and I hope they learn that too by then. So.
Thank you for a very stimulating discussion. CeCelia Zorn, Gabe Kojoian, Tony Gulig, and Gretchen Hutterli. Good afternoon.